everyone, I'm Kiki Newman. Thank you so much for joining Coffee and Kabbalah, our weekly exploration of meaningful messages from the Parsha. In today's class on Parshas Vayakhel, we're going to discuss parallel universes, Greek philosopher Plato's theory on universalism, and how to love the body that you are given. At Sifta for Coffee and Kabbalah, Parshas Vayakhel, thank you so much for joining. We're going to dedicate today's learning to the safety of all of our soldiers, the hostages. Vayakhel, we're in the final stretch of Chomesh Shemos. We're in season 2 of the Bible. We're at the season finale. Vayakhel and Pekudei are usually together, but this year they're separated because it's a leap year. Vayakhel and Pekudei are very interesting. This happens the day after Yom Kippur. Rashi tells us Vayakhel, Moshe comes down from the mountain the third time after he got Kapara. He gathers everyone to tell them what Hashem said, which was the instructions of how to build the Mishkan. Now, before he does this, before he tells them about the Mishkan, he reiterates the commandment to observe the Shabbos, and then he gives instructions of how to build the Mishkan. Now, this is where we get all the halachos of what Shabbos is, because the Torah is very vague. It just says, Kol sheishes yamim ta'asa malacha v'shem shvi Shabbos lo ta'asu malacha. How do you decide what is considered labor and what is not labor? Like, it's hard for me to take a walk, so I can't take a walk on Shabbos. Moving my couch is allowed. Who decides? The Torah is very, very vague. Other than telling us you can't make a fire on Shabbos, and then hinting to the gathering of the sticks from Makot Sheitim, the Torah doesn't tell us any of the details of laws on Shabbos. All of them are learned from this Parsha in Vayakhel, when there's a juxtaposition where Moshe says to them, here are the laws of the Mishkan, you cannot do work on Shabbos, and then proceeds to tell them all the malachos of the Mishkan. So the Chachamim learned from this that Moshe was warning them that I'm going to tell you how to build the Mishkan. You're going to be so excited to build the Mishkan, and therefore I'm warning you not to build on Shabbos. This is what you can't do on Shabbos. And the juxtaposition of the malacha of Shabbos, not to do malacha on Shabbos, and then the laws of the Mishkan teach us that everything that was done in the Mishkan becomes the halachos of what you can't do on Shabbos. The Chachamim broke down into 39 different creative acts. What's interesting is that they're all creative acts, not destructive acts. So therefore, there might be writing, it might be relaxing to write, but because it's creative, and in the 6 days of creation, Hashem created, and on Shabbos is our time to stop creating and to unite and to bring together all of the work, to fuse together all the differences and the disconnect from all the week. On Shabbos is our time to pause and just bring it all together, to process, to connect, to be, and to be present. So it's very interesting that it ends up being that on Shabbos, you can do things that are labor intensive, like you can move your furniture around. We used to have to move our furniture every Shabbos 3 times we had our shul in our house. So we would set up for shul, then move all the furniture, set up for a meal, then put all the furniture away, set up for shul again. That's fine, even though it's labor intensive. But writing something, jotting something down, that's not allowed on Shabbos. Or planting, which might be soothing. It's not about how labor intensive it is. It's about the creative power, and it's about whether it's done in the Mishkan. So anyways, that's where we get the halachos of Shabbos from, and that's how we learn what we can't do on Shabbos. It's the 39 things that were done in dyeing, in sewing, in planting, threshing, harvesting, making food, kneading the dough, bringing a fire, moving things from one domain to another domain, anything that was involved in being in Mishkan, those are things you can't do on Shabbos. This is, again, we're just recapping the Parsha. So now, Moshe comes down, gathers everyone together, and now he's telling them, repeating to them, the instructions that Hashem gave him on how to build the Mishkan. And then it gets even more interesting. The rest of the Parsha is involved with the Moshe appointing Betzalel and Aliyah to be the artists that are in charge of making the Mishkan and the furnishing. And the rest of the Parsha spends 2 parshios actually, goes into great detail repeating what was already discussed in Teruma Tetzaveh. Teruma was Hashem telling Moshe how to build the Mishkan, all of the kelim, all of the fabrics, materials, gold, wood, silver, needed, oil, right, threads needed to build the Mishkan. Then Tetzaveh was the more of the kelim of the Mishkan and mostly the clothing that were worn and how to create them. And now comes repetition in Vayakhel Pekudei of Teruma Tetzaveh of how Bnei Israel actually completed what was told to them, what was already described in the Torah. So it goes through all of the details. It goes through the measurements, the colors, the fabrics of all of the kelim of the Mishkan, the walls of the Mishkan, the menorah, mizbachos, and then it goes again. Many psukim are dedicated to again describing the clothing of the Kohen Gadol and how they made it and how they actualized making it again. Then finally, at the end of the Parsha, the Mishkan is complete and all of the components are brought to Moshe, who picks up the Mishkan, who is making erects the Mishkan and anoints it with the holy oil, initiates Aaron and the sons into the kahuna, the priesthood, and then finally, the end is when a cloud appears over the Mishkan, showing that the Shekhinah has rested in it. That's the Parsha. Okay. Now, the main questions we have on this week's Parsha, which is that the Torah is not as big as we think of it. The whole entire Torah is actually the size of an average novel. Even though we learned it over a year because there's so much depth to every word in the Torah, the Torah is so concise in the words that it gives us. For example, Shabbos, it gives us one vague word and we have to figure out all the lachos from it. Yet, the question in this week's Parsha, the whole two Parshas, Vayakhel and Pekudei, could have been replaced with one sentence. And Moshe repeated to Bnei Israel all that Hashem had told him about how to make the Mishkan, and Bnei Israel did it. The end. Then we would have skipped two Parshas in the Torah, a few hundred psukim, and 13 chapters that seemingly are extra in the Torah, just to repeat something that was already told. And even if the Torah wasn't so exact in its words, it's very unusual if I was telling you a story, and I would tell you that, this morning I went out to a walk and I saw this goat, and then my son told me that in his school they're having a Mesibat Siddur. And then I came home and I saw my husband, and then I told him that I was taking a walk and I saw a goat with my son, and I repeated the whole thing, and then I saw my husband and I told him what happened. It would be very weird for me to repeat it to you and say 3 times, again, and then I did it. But it's very unusual for the Torah to repeat in detail what it already said, almost replicating these two parshios. So one is Hashem telling to Moshe, and again, it's the Moshe telling it's the Jewish people, and then most of it is that how they actually did it. It said they did so-and-so from this previous parsha. So that's the big question that we have in this week's parsha. Now, just a foreshadow that in this class we're going to be talking about the seeming repetition of these parshios, and we're going to be understanding it through understanding the Torah's view on parallel universes, Plato's theory, and universalism, and how the Torah looks at those ideas. So the answer that the Chachamim give us is, why is it repeated again in Vayakhel Pekudei what was already said in Truma Tetzada? Why these 13 extra? Why so many extra psukim? And the Chachamim tell us that it's actually talking about 2 different Mishkanot. There's not just one Mishkan that's described. The Mishkan described in Truma Tetzada is a different Mishkan. The Mishkan that Hashem described to Moshe was not the same Mishkan that the Jewish people are building in this week's Parsha. That Mishkan is a Mishkan above. It's an abstract spiritual Mishkan that is Lamaila, that exists on a spiritual plane in another dimension. It's not just a description. In another spiritual dimension that is parallel to our world, Hashem created a Mishkan that exists in its abstract form. Now, we learn all the time about the idea of the abstract, and thing we're going to talk about today. So I'll give you a little bit of background. We learned that there's 4 worlds. Not like we imagine it, like our world, and above there's another world. In the world that we live in, there's 4 dimensions to our world, or 4 universes. One of them is the world of Atzilut, where only emanations of light exist. Then there's Bria, where souls and angels exist. Then there's a dimension of Yetzirah, where form begins to exist. And then there's the world of Yetzirah, which is the world of abstract form, where there's shapes, form, without actual tangible matter. There's colors, there's the form of something. And then there's our world, the world of Asiya, the world of action, the world of physicality, where that manifests into a physical body that actually is tangible, that you can touch and see. The form exists outside of being able to touch something. It is the form of something, the shape of something. That's the world of Yetzirah. So in that spirit dimension of the universe, there exists another Mishkan. And the Chachamim say, and the Mishkan that's described that the Bnei Israel actually built is the Mishkan down below. That is modeled after that Mishkan, that's supposed to look as much as possible like replicate that Mishkan, but it's a totally different Mishkan. So that's the answer to the Chachamim. Let's go a little bit more into that, because the caveat is that a lot of people tend to think that they just mirror. There's like a spiritual idea of the Mishkan, and then there's another Mishkan here that mirrors that spiritual idea. But no, the Chachamim tells us actually 2 distinct entities. One is celestial and spiritual. It exists. There's a Mishkan Lamaila, and the other one below includes physical matter and it's formed by man. It's 2 different entities. And this is where we learn in Kabbalah about the idea of parallel universe. If you watch sci-fi movies, you see all about parallel dimensions, other dimensions in the world. Kabbalah talks about this from the very, very beginning. That in our world, the word Kabbalah itself actually means makbil. And if you don't know Hebrew, what does makbil mean? Parallel. Like a kvish makbil, a parallel road, is makbil. Makbil means that when something is makbil, if you're sitting parallel to me, that would say makbil. So the word Kabbalah literally means makbil, because at the core of kabbalistic teachings, what Kabbalah is trying to tell us is that every single physical thing in this world has a parallel to it above, and another dimension above. And the Kabbalah will go through every part of the Torah and tell you, for example, when Yaakov kisses Rachel, that above, at the same time, in another parallel dimension, Yaakov represents Tiferet, and Rachel represents Malchus, the feminine. In the parallel universe, Tiferet and Malchus are uniting. And down here, it's embodied in a parallel world as Yaakov and Rachel kissing, because that's who they represent. And it goes through everything in the Torah, and will tell you, the Kabbalah will tell you, everything in this world has a spiritual parallel in another dimension above. So whatever you're doing down here, something is happening above at the same time that parallels what's happening down here. And Kabbalah will uncover throughout the Torah and say, you're not just learning Torah. Above, there's things happening. There's spheres moving. There's worlds moving. When Shabbos happens down here, the world has an aliyah. The whole world of Asiyah goes up to the world of Yetzirah, and Yetzirah above. And that is why on Shabbos, you can eat as much food as you want without having any kavanah and intention, because already the worlds are elevated. Kabbalah will go into all of that spiritual parallel universe that's happening above. But Chassidus actually is different than Kabbalah, where Chassidut says, I'm more concerned about what happens here than what happens above, because I don't understand that. Like, what's happening above is cool, but how does that affect me? What I'm concerned about, whatever we're learning in the Torah, is also happening in another dimension in our microcosm of our bodies. So Chassidus will tell us that when Rivka is pregnant with twins, that at the same time in another dimension, it also means that every one of us is pregnant with two souls, like a Yaakov and an Esau soul. Every single part of the Torah, Chassidus will tell us how it is us. When Yaakov travels to Lavan on another dimension, the Torah is telling us that it's the journey of every soul from Yaakov went from Eretz Yisrael, from a holy place down to Haran, to low, dark place. It's paralleling the journey of every neshama from heaven down into this world, into the world of darkness, into Haran. Every single part of the Torah, Chassidus will tell you what's happening in this dimension. So there's so many parallel dimensions. There's what happens in history in the Torah, and then that's paralleling what's happening in the higher worlds of the spheros. And then there's what's happening in our body, in our soul, in the journey of our neshama at the same time. So this idea of things happening on different spiritual planes and dimensions and physical dimension mirroring other places is something we're used to. Now, we also see this, the idea of the Mishkan above and the Mishkan below. We see this in many places. For example, we learn about Gan Eden. Where is Gan Eden? Is Gan Eden a garden in this world? Or is it a place where neshamas go to above? Which is Gan Eden? And when someone asks you, where is Gan Eden? What would you say? There's two Gan Eden. There's actually two. There's one in this physical world, where it's an actual physical garden, where Adam and Chava were in, which is hidden somewhere, where there's actual rivers that come out of it, flow out of it. I have some theories on beautiful rivers in Israel, and I feel like they're the ones that flow from Gan Eden. And then there's another Gan Eden, which is parallel, literally above, parallel, somewhere in another dimension, parallel to the Gan Eden below, is Gan Eden Shamaila. And that's where the neshamos and the souls go after 120 years, where they experience the glory of God. Then we have Yerushalayim Shel Matzah. Do you ever hear the song of Avram Fried? When Bnei Yisrael were exiled, and were exiled from Jerusalem, Hashem said, Lo avo Yerushalayim Shel Maila, ad she'avo Yerushalayim Shel Matzah. I will not enter the Yerushalayim above, the spiritual Yerushalayim that exists in this other dimension, until you return, until you can be back in Yerushalayim Shel Matzah. Because that's where I want to be. So we have in everything in the world, and it exists in the spiritual plane or in a more abstract place in another dimension, and it also exists in our world. Now, why is this important? Because now we know that there's two Mishkans. There's a Mishkan above that Hashem created, and then there's a Mishkan below. So come and say, okay, great. So that's why the Torah repeats it, because there's two different Mishkans. However, we're still left with this question because we still want to understand why the Torah needs to repeat every detail. Maybe the Torah could have replaced all of that and say that Bnei Yisrael built the physical manifestation of the spiritual model Mishkan above, or Bnei Yisrael created a Mishkan below modeled after the Mishkan above, without going into the details, right? We created another Mishkan below that was modeled after the Mishkan above, which Hashem wanted us to model it after. He said, I made this Mishkan, and you make another Mishkan below that's modeled after that one, right? Great. Still, why do we have to go into every single detail? And that's the question that we're left with. Okay, so the answer to this repetition, I heard this beautiful teaching from Rabbi Y. Jacobson years ago, based on the teachings of Plato. And I said Plato when I taught this in seminary, and they were like, oh, I won't say Plato. I'm like, that's not what I meant. Plato was a Greek philosopher who searched for truth in a world full of lies, like many of those other Greek philosophers. And the truth that he found in Plato's theory was that truth is the unchanging universal form that is always the sum. And I'll explain what he meant. He said that there's many deformities in the world. For example, a tree might be in many different types of twisted, deformed trees, all different types of trees. What is the truth about a tree? He says every tree shares a universal truth to every tree. That every tree has roots, it has a trunk, and it has branches, and there's a form of perfection, and that is the perfect form. So whatever the universal form that every tree shares, that is perfection. Everything else, it comes from the tree taking on a physical form, and then it takes on all the deformities of the world. So he says that the abstract image of a tree in its perfect state is the truth of a tree. And then as it enters the physical dimension, it takes on all the deformities of the world of lies. But in its true form, it's perfection. He looks to find the form that unites everything. That's universalism. So for example, a cup. There's so many different colors of cups. There's paper cups, there's plastic cups, there's glass cups. What is the truth about a cup? All cups share one universal form or shape, that they all have a sides and a bottom and an opening on top. That is the perfect abstract form of a cup. Everything else is, as we descend into differences, it becomes lies and falsehood, and it's emes anymore. So he was looking for the emes of everything, to search for the emes in all things, which is this universal idea. So truth is the universal sameness. That's what I was looking for in all matter and all creations in the world, and all trees, all cups, all humans have a universal sameness, and falsehood and distortions come from this world of lies. So that's Plato's theory in a nutshell. Now, what's really interesting is that Chassidut has a very similar ideas to this. In Tanya, chapter 32, there's an entire chapter teaching us on Avos Yisrael, on the Lev. 32 is the sum of Lev, on how we can have Avos Yisrael. And it teaches us that we can truly love every human being in the world by recognizing that all of our differences come only from the superficial external parts of us. But if we would strip away all the layers of our externals that divide me and you, if I would keep taking away the distractions of like how a person looks or what they wear, what they do, and I could keep stripping that away, I'll get to the core of their soul, which is perfect and beautiful. And the same, we all have the same united soul that unites all of us. And that it comes from the same exact place, from Knesset Yisrael. So Chassidus teaches the same thing, that if the all hatred and differences come from external things that aren't even real, that pass, that don't stay forever. And we have to keep trying to look at what really matters about the person, which is their soul. And that way we can truly love every person. And it's true, right? When you meet someone, you're so distracted by the differences. But if we keep stripping away those things and get to know who they are at their core, deeper down, right? We teach this to our children, like, look deeper. Don't just reject somebody because of how they look a little bit different, you or talk different than you, or dress differently than you. Let's look deeper and find the universal sameness in everybody. That we all want to love, we all want to be loved, we all want to connect with people, we all want to be better people, we all want peace in the world, there's so much similarities for both of us. And this concept of Chassidus is very, very similar to Plato's idea of universalism, and we can learn a lot from his theory. Now, what's interesting about Plato's theory is that we don't realize how much Plato's theory has affected the Western culture and our culture nowadays, and how much of our beliefs on the world are shaped by Plato's theory. And for me, one of the negative things that came from Plato's theory, or we'll later on talk about his conclusion to his theory, is this concept of universalized beauty standards. That rather than realizing that beauty can come in all shapes and sizes, and Hashem made every one of us uniquely, purposely different, so that our beauty is in how different we are and how unique we are and how everyone is, attracted and drawn to something unique and different, and that's what makes us different. Instead, we adopted this, I believe we adopted this theory from Plato that there's a universal standard of what beauty looks like, that the most people decide this is what beauty looks like, and it changes in different eras, in different cultures, it's different. And whatever the people in this culture, in this era decide this is universalized beauty standard, that is perfect. And the more you move away from that, the less perfect you are, which is exactly what Plato's theory is. And that's why everyone is, especially women, but even men, there's a universal body, like the perfect man, and everyone's just trying to make their body that Hashem made purposely different to try and fit themselves to be more as universally accepted, to be the perfect universal standard of beauty, to shape ourselves, even with people with surgery, with injections, with harmful things, to make ourselves look like that, because we've come to believe that there's a universal beauty standard rather than beauty comes in every shape and size. So I feel like that's one of the negative things we need to move away from and realize that that's a harmful standard that we've come to accept. That image of perceived perfection, that's what's perfect is, and that everything further away from that is less than perfect. And that's ridiculous, right? Especially because we don't want to all walk around looking like clones. That's not perfect. That's ridiculous. That's the opposite of what creation in this world is for. That's the opposite of growth. Growth is looking and saying, Hashem picked my body and made my body in the shape and size that he wanted it to be, that he godly intended it for it to be. And I should look to embrace that and look and to appreciate that rather than try to change it. Be try and look and see the beauty that Hashem sees in me. Say, I want to look at myself with the eyes and the beauty that Hashem created me in, because Hashem doesn't make mistakes, and Hashem made me the exact beauty that he wants me to be, not to look like somebody else. So that was just a side topic of how I feel, the negatives of Plato, but even though there's so much positive to learn from. Okay, now I want to discuss that even though the theory of Plato, that there's an abstract universal truth to everything, has so much similarities to Chassidus, here is where the big difference is. The theory is almost identical. In Chassidus, we believe the exact same thing, that the differences and imperfections are in the physical, and we should reject the physical. And if we remove the physical at our core, we're all one and the same. We all agree with all that. But the big difference is in Plato's conclusion, and the conclusion of Hashem couldn't be more opposite from one another. Plato's conclusion was, what his theory led him to believe and to conclude, is to reject the physical differences, where things become deformed and the deformities that come up from this world of lies. He said, let me reject all that. That's falsehood. That's evil. That's bad. I want to go as much as I can, move towards perfect things in an abstract form, how things are in a universal sameness, and reject the deformities and the twistedness that comes from being in this world. And whereas with Hashem reached the exact opposite conclusion. And I'll give a little bit of background to it. So to understand this a little bit, there's a theory I call that I named the hay theory. Oh, I even brought a picture this time. Okay. This hay theory, we're not going to talk about so much today. I'm just going to touch on it. We're going to talk about it a lot more with Pesach, because this is a Pesach concept. There is a pasuk in the Torah that after Hashem created the world, it says, Eila toldo shemayim v'aretz b'hi baram. These are the chronicles of the heavens and earth when he created them. And the Chachamim say b'hi baram means that's b'hei baram, that God created the whole world with hay. Now, this is the hay. What does that teach us? It teaches us that soon into the fact, so the hay is made up of three parts. This is the top of the hay is the thought, is our thoughts and ideas. The next part of the hay is our speech, and the leg of the hay is action. Those are the three levushim that we discussed in Parsha Tetzaveh, right? That we have three expressions of our soul, three ways of functioning with the world, which are our thought, speech, and action. Now, there's an inherent gap that God creating the world of hay teaches us that Hashem sewed into the fiber of our existence a gap between our ideas and our ideals in the abstract and how we want things to be, the person we want to be, the life we want to have, the marriage we want to have, and how it actually comes into reality. So our thoughts are up here. We have these beautiful visions of the kind of mom I want to be, the kind of wife I want to be. Then I can articulate that. So I'll give you an example. I want to be, the most loving. I want to have this perfect, loving marriage where we always speak nicely to each other, where we're respectful to each other, where we're always like looking at each other's eyes and admiring how beautiful, how amazing each other's are, and we walk holding hands, walking down into the sunset. See, from thought into speech, I just articulated that into speech. So I had this idea of this perfect marriage. I even articulated it into speech. There's no gap here, right? Because I can easily, it's doable. I can take my thought and express it in speech, right? That's possible. No gap there. The gap is when I try and put that into action. When I try and take any concept, any idea of ideal or perfect idea in the world and bring it down into action. There's the marriage of my dreams, and then there's real life marriage, which is ups and downs, whereas real life struggles that come our way. There's facing life together, and there's beautiful moments, but there's also real life marriage, which is sometimes there's great beautiful moments like one I described, and then there's days when life throws things at you and you have to overcome them together and work through them. And there's the roller coaster of real life, right? And I always say, even if you get to this in your picture, you're holding hands with your beloved, walking down into the ocean in the sunset. Even if that were to happen in real life, right? Because that could happen. You can have your beloved. Hopefully everyone has the love of their life, walking hands, holding hands in the sunset. It's not ever, it's not possible for it ever to be exactly like you imagine, because there's things you don't expect. There's things that life throws at you. For example, it might be sweaty, there might be wind, there might be sand everywhere. Things you don't take into account when you have this idea and image. There's things that, even if it's the perfect moment, right? There's things that happen. You might get splashed, you might be thirsty. It's not possible to translate perfectly an idea into perfect reality. It's impossible. Even if it is great, it's not exactly as you imagined it in your mind or articulated in your speech. And that's intentional. Hashem intentionally created this, and we're going to learn about that later on in Pesach, why it's that way. But what we're learning now, to bring that into what we're talking about the Mishkan, oh no, there was the video got cut off. Hopefully this one works. So to bring it back into in summary, the hay theory is that there is an inherent gap between how things are idealistically in thought and in speech and how they are actually down below. And that goes back to and that's what Platos theory is, that the abstract is more perfect and down below, it is not as perfect as we imagine it to be. And just to give you a teaser for this class to be, that is where one of my favorite ideas in life is that all of true life and true connection and true growth happens in the gap in the hay. Because without that gap, we're trying our best, and we're spending our whole life trying to bridge that gap, to create a reality that as much as possible aligns with our ideals. We want to, as much as possible, be the mom I wish I was, right? I want to be that mom that greets my kids with a hug and a smile every day and serves them cookies and milk and is never upset no matter what they do, right? And as much as possible, I'm trying to align my action, my reality with my vision and ideal. But there's always going to be a gap, because that's where real life happens. And you know why that gap is there? Because that's where we have room for growth. That's where we can work on ourselves. That's when we have vulnerability, connection, growth, avoda. And if there wasn't that gap, imagine everything I pictured and said was just, I could implement it, snap my fingers, and it's perfect. Where is growth? Where is meaning? Where is anything? It's like this frustrating, Stepford, like I always say, the Stepford wife existence. This ties back into last week's Parsha. It really follows along Kiki about messing up, that Hashem didn't make us perfect angels to never mess up. Hashem gave us free choice, and we only have true free choice if we actually do mess up. So that place where we're always trying as much as possible to bridge that gap, while knowing that we're never going to fully bridge it until Mashiach comes. That we're doing our best to do it. And that's where, the summary, that's what it means. The summary of life is that there's this gap and we're trying our best to bridge it. And in that space, accepting that that's where we grow and as human being. Okay. Now, going back to this, both the Torah and Plato agree that the abstract is more perfect. The ideal of who I want to be, my ideal, is a way more perfect existence. The Mishkan, let's take it back into the Mishkan, just like Plato would agree that's perfection. The Mishkan above is way more perfect. The Mishkan above was created by God. It was a celestial Mishkan, perfect Mishkan created by God. Mishkan down below, in contrary, is created by human beings who just committed a big sin with materials that were not wholly perfect materials. In fact, in this week's Parsha, we learned about the gold. Two things. One is that the gold was actually the same gold that was used for the Chet Egel was then used for the Mishkan. This is gold that was used for a sin, so it's not a perfect Mishkan. And not only that, we learned that some of the gold, it says that there's a pasuk in this week's Parsha that says that Vayaviu hanashim al hanashim. What does it mean on the women? The women took the jewelry off their bodies and donated to the Mishkan. And Rashi, then the pasuk goes and describes which are the jewelry that the women took off their bodies. One of the pieces of jewelry is a kumaz. Rashi says, what is that? And he says it's kan makom zina. It's a piece of jewelry that the women would wear, a piece of gold to decorate their genitalia, their lower private parts. And it was a beautiful ornament, and they took it off their bodies, it says al nashim, and gave it to the Mishkan, and that's what the Mishkan was made out of. That was obviously the beauty of Hashem wanting to take the physical and use it for the holy. So there's a Mishkan above and it's perfection. Then there's the Mishkan below, which is no way is perfect like the Mishkan above, because it's made by flawed human beings who are not perfect, who are not able to achieve perfection, because we're not meant to. And we're not going to argue that the Mishkan above is perfect and the Mishkan down below, like Plato would say, is imperfect, is false, right? It's created it's in this physical world, it's going to be false. But yet, here is the punchline. Well, Plato would reject this Mishkan and say, let's look at it as worse than the Mishkan above. Hashem has the exact opposite conclusion. And we see it in this week's Parsha. Finally, open your sources to the third source, Shemos, Mem, in this week's Parsha, Lamed Daled, Vayichas Ha'anan, I actually think it's Pekudei, by the way, Vayichas Ha'anan, and the Oil Moed, Kvod Hashem Alat Mishkan. Which Mishkan did Hashem choose to put his Shekhinah in, to dwell in, to put his essence in, to be in the perfect Mishkan above? No. In which Mishkan? In the imperfect, flawed Mishkan below, that was made by human beings who are just sin, imperfect people who are capable of sin, and with fabrics that were just used for with gold that was just used for an idol. That is the Mishkan that Hashem said, that is perfect to me, because I'm not looking for perfection. So yes, the other one might be perfect, but that's not where I want to be. Where I want to be, where my Shekhinah wants to be, what I created the entire world for, is to be with you. And we might ask why. Why is it that Hashem would prefer our imperfect Mishkan over the perfect Mishkan above to rest his Shekhinah in? And I actually heard this beautiful, my friend Malka Fleischer from Efrat gave me a beautiful example of it's a child who, if anyone here is a mom or in a relationship or someone that they love, and it's your birthday, which card do you prefer? A beautiful card that your child bought from the store, or that you printed, that his dad printed from the computer, or a scribbled backwards, happy birthday, I love you, mommy, from your child that is completely imperfect. It goes without saying that which one would you rather? Which one are you going to throw in the garbage? Which one are you going to keep forever? The scribbled backwards happy birthday. Why? It's imperfect. It's not as nice as the other one. It's a scribble scrabble, because you're not looking for perfection. You're looking for your child. You're looking for the love, for the effort, for him. You want his work, not perfection. I want you. And if you're in a relationship, right, your spouse or your beloved could buy you a Hallmark card with the most beautiful poem that was published in every book and magazine in the world and give it to you. Or they can write you a letter that was from their own, that's not going to be published and no one's going to publish. But that was their own words that they meant with their own handwriting that might not be legible, might be legible. Which one is precious to you? The beautiful card that they picked out in the Hallmark gift shop, or the one that they wrote by their hand? And obviously it goes without saying that the one that is precious to you is not what's more beautiful or standardized, universalized beauty, or what's more perfect. It's you're looking for the effort, for the love of somebody that I want you, not someone else's work. I want your work. And that's what Hashem says. I'm not looking for angelic perfection. I'm looking for your effort, for your love, for your work, however it looks, however scribbled it might be. And I heard this actual parish about like kids who dive into Hashem or who say tefillah and they say all the words wrong and they get it wrong. It's so beautiful to Hashem. Think about it. It's like your little child saying mommy, right? And saying everything backwards. It's you. I love you because it's you. And that is why this is more precious. That is why Hashem chooses the imperfect Mishkan below to dwell in over the perfect Mishkan above. This goes all the way back to Har Sinai with the argument between the angels and the Jewish people, saying, why did you give the Torah? But why are you giving the Torah to these flawed people? They could sin like they did in last week's Parsha. And Hashem says, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a real relationship with people who could sin, who could mess up, but they, at the end of the day, they try their best, they do their best, and they're giving me everything that they got, right? And even if they mess up, they're trying, they're recommitting, they're giving me what they got, and that's what I want. I want you, not someone else's perfection. I want your best work that you can give me today. I'm going to end off with a story. Oh, and that is why Hashem says, Lo avol Yerushalayim shel Maila, ad shavo Yerushalayim shel Mata, because I'm not interested in the heavenly perfection. I'm interested in you. I saw this beautiful quote. When Hashem sees a physical human being filled with struggle and anxiety, stretching out his hand to help a person in need, or stretches his hand to do a mitzvah, Hashem turns to the billions of angels, filling the heavens, and he says to them, have you ever seen anything as beautiful as that? That's what's beautiful. When someone who's struggling their hardest picks themselves up and pushes themselves to do one kind act for another person. That's beauty. Beauty is in that struggle, in the trying, in the falling, and in that pushing ourselves, pushing our humanity. That's what's beautiful. There's a story that says about the Lubavitcher Rebbe where a teenage boy visited him. And he expressed anguish at the light of the struggle of his life and disappointment of the life. He said, why can't it just be simple and easy? He said, because why can things be easy? I'm trying again, and I feel like I'm reaching back where I started. And this is something that I really relate to, like even in trying to be on time. Like I try so hard to be on time to this year for years. You guys know, right? And sometimes I feel like I'm working on it. I have like methods and things I try, and then I'm back. Sometimes I feel like I'm back where I started. I'm still late every single week or almost every week, and I feel like I'm back where I started. What's the point? Like, why is life so hard? This is just a small example. Why all the struggles? Like, what's the point of the struggle, right? What's the point of everything? And the Rebbe told him, because we're not angels. The Rebbe said, angels are impeccable and flawless, always on target. But human beings, we're fragmented, right? We go up and down. We're multidimensional. And he said, but why did Hashem have to make us in such a complicated way? Wouldn't God enjoy us more if we were like perfect, like angels? And the Rebbe asked the man, he said, do you have a hobby? And he said he likes to paint. He likes to draw paintings. So the Rebbe said, what is more accurate, a painting or a photograph, right? A painting of you or a photograph of you? And he says, of course, a photograph. A photograph captures everything. A painting is not. He says, but what is worth more? What would someone pay more for? And he said, well, a painting, you pay much more. The Rebbe says, I don't understand. Why would I pay more for a painting when even the best artist can't make it as real, as perfect as a photograph? I don't understand. And Rebbe, he said, well, Rebbe, of course you understand that what you're paying for is not how perfect it is and how much it looks like it. You're paying for the emotion and the feeling that went into the painting. And like I think about all the famous abstract artists, you're painting for their work, their personality, with the heart that they put into their work, like Van Gogh, the Picassos. Their work, the more abstract, the more it was speaking about abstract. So he said a painting captures the richness of the human experience, of the struggles, of the feeling and the emotion, while a picture is just cold and bland, right? And we were created not in the photograph of man, of God, in the image and the likeness of God, right? We weren't a photograph copy of God, a perfect photograph. We're in Hashem's likeness. We're in the image of Hashem. We're all works of art of Hashem. And he says that's what gives the painting his value. And the Rebbe smiled and said, that's the answer to your question. Angels are like photographs, while human beings are pieces of art, right? And that, again, should remind us, going back to that body image, we're not meant to be a photograph copy and paste. We're a work of Hashem's art, intentionally made with feeling, with care, with thought, and with intention. And that's why, angels don't make mistakes, but human beings, the beauty and the value that we bring are our struggle, our search for meaning, the emotion, the ups and downs. That's what we bring to the table. And that's what's beautiful to Hashem. So I want to bless all of us that our life, as much as possible, every part of our life should mirror the ideal that we would like for ourselves, that we should be, the parent we want to be, have the marriage we would love for ourselves, have the children that we would imagine for ourselves, have the life we'd imagine for ourselves. And also to know that when it doesn't go that way, that's where beauty happens. That when it doesn't go that way, that's okay. We're meant to be perfectly imperfect. We're a work of art. And just to remember, even as a mom, that when you mess up, when you're not the mom that you want, your children are not looking for the perfect mother. They want you. They want you to be their mother. How you are, the best that you can be. Not perfection. They want you, right? And just like you want your spouse, you're not looking for the perfect, like management says, you're not looking for the perfect man. You want your husband, right? We want him. It is who he is. We're the one who Hashem wants. He wants us, not perfection. So l'chaim, to being our best selves and knowing that when we're not, that we're human. Thank you for joining.